You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.
Fresh from the kicking them while they're already down desk this morning, NASA's Office of the Inspector General released a report with major concerns about the Space Launch System Block 1B's development and management. SLS Block 1B, by the way, is going to be the new heavy-lift rocket that will launch the Artemis 4 mission in no earlier than September 2028. And you want to take a wild guess at how that report reflects on Boeing?
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy.
Today is August 12th, 2024. I'm Maria Varmazis, and this is T-minus. NASA's Office of Inspector General slams SLS management. SpaceX launches satellites for Space Norway Arctic Broadband. Brazil and Chile sign a space collaboration MOU. And our guest today is Ariel Ekblaw, CEO of the Aurelia Institute. And I got to visit the Aurelia Institute's new Space Habitat Pavilion while it was on display in Boston, and I got to ask them all about the really cool design. So stick around for that chat later in the program. Happy Monday, everybody. Let's dive into today's Intel briefing. NASA's Office of the Inspector General released a report on the SLS Block 1B's development, monitoring work done from August 2023 to May of this year. And unfortunately for Boeing, the results of that audit are not very kind, with the OIG reporting that there have been multiple issues encountered with the rocket's development that will likely hinder the rocket's readiness for Artemis 4, including, and I quote, Boeing's ineffective quality management and inexperienced workforce, continued cost increases and schedule delays, and the delayed establishment of a cost and schedule baseline. To be more specific, in another quote here, Boeing's quality management system does not meet industry standards in core stage productions at Michoud, and that the OIG found a number of nonconformances during the manufacturing process, and that Boeing's quality management system to address those nonconformances were, and I quote again, ineffective. That is a lot of ways to say that some big changes need to be made if the Artemis 4 mission is ever going to get off the ground, literally. The report makes 4 recommendations to NASA for next steps, 3 of which NASA has agreed to. In addition to overhauling the Boeing quality management system, NASA will also be performing a detailed cost overrun analysis and will conduct regular reviews of the contract in coordination with the Defense Contract Management Agency to ensure no cost overruns. The only recommendation NASA did not agree with was fining Boeing for not complying with quality control standards. As NASA said, this would be outside of the bounds of their existing contract. Moving on to other news now, SpaceX broke its own record this weekend with the 22nd reuse of its first stage booster. The rocket company launched 2 satellites as part of the Space Norway Arctic Satellite Broadband mission, or ASBM, from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. ASBM 1 and 2 are twin satellites built by Northrop Grumman for Space Norway in cooperation with Inmarsat and the Norwegian Ministry of Defense. The satellites are designed to bring mobile broadband coverage in the Arctic for both civilians and military. And SpaceX was aiming to launch another Falcon 9 rocket from the Space Coast on Sunday morning, but scrubbed the attempt with less than a minute on the countdown clock. It had no issues getting the job done on Monday morning, though, launching 23 Starlink satellites from Kennedy Space Center at 6:37 a.m. The first stage booster for the mission made its 17th flight with another recovery landing downrange on the drone ship, a short fall of Gravitas, stationed in the Atlantic. Rocket Lab celebrated the 52nd Electron launch in the early hours of Monday in New Zealand. A Sky Full of SARS mission saw Rocket Lab successfully deploy a single satellite for Capella Space. The launch window for Rocket Lab's next Electron mission will be announced in the coming days. Brazil and Chile have signed a Memorandum of Understanding on space cooperation. The two Latin American nations plan to exchange information on science, technology, and innovation in space matters, and identify and promote research and development projects and programs that can be carried out cooperatively. The agreement allows Brazil and Chile to exchange information on activities, public policies, practices, laws, and regulations related to research and development of science, technology, and innovation in space fields. Brazilian President Lula da Silva used the opportunity to outline the uses of space for good, stating, and I quote, "The delusions of billionaires who prefer to colonize Mars rather than take care of the Earth are no substitute for the action and guidance of the state," he argued. "Today there is no activity that does not require space infrastructure," he added, citing the importance of addressing climate change. Azerbaijan's space agency Azercosmos has signed a new partnership agreement with the Civil Aviation Authority of Botswana. Azercosmos currently supplies satellite services to nearly half of the 13 countries in southern Africa. Through this agreement, the Botswana government agency will utilize data services provided via the Azerspace 1 telecommunications satellite. The U.S. Space Agency launched a sounding rocket from the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico over the weekend to study the sun. NASA's Full Sun Ultraviolet Rocket Spectrograph, also known as FIRST, aims to study our nearest star and compare it to others that scientists have studied. FIRST will obtain the first high-resolution spectra of the sun as a star in vacuum ultraviolet, a light wavelength that's absorbed in Earth's atmosphere, meaning it can really only be observed from space. Astronomers have studied other stars in vacuum ultraviolet with orbiting telescopes, but these instruments are way too sensitive to be pointed at our sun. The sounding rocket opened during flight, allowing FIRST to observe the sun for approximately 5 minutes before closing and then falling back to the Earth's surface. NASA has released a request for information seeking interest from American companies and institutions in conducting a mission using the agency's Viper moon rover. Viper, which is short for Volatiles Investigating Polar Exploration Rover, was designed to map the location and concentration of potential off-planet resources like ice on the south pole of the Earth's moon. NASA announced last month its intent to discontinue Viper and to pursue alternative methods to verify the presence of frozen water at the lunar south pole, but could contribute the Viper rover as is to an interested partner. From July 17th to August 1st, NASA accepted expressions of interest from the broader community in using the existing Viper rover system. The request for information now seeks to learn more about how interested parties would use Viper at minimal to no cost to the U.S. government. And you can find that RFI and links to further reading on all of the stories that we've mentioned in our show notes. We've also included an opinion piece from The Hill on what space policy could look like after the 2024 U.S. election. Hey T-Minus crew, every Monday we produce a written intelligence roundup, and it is called Signals and Space. So if you happen to miss any T-Minus episodes, this strategic intelligence product will get you up to speed in the fastest way possible. It's all signal, no noise. You can sign up for Signals and Space in our show notes or at space.n2k.com.
Defense contractors face immense pressure to comply with CMMC 2.0 security standards, needing a secure, user-friendly file-sharing solution. KiteWorks, a FedRAMP moderate authorized solution, supports nearly 90% of CMMC 2.0 Level 3 requirements, reducing compliance effort and cost. KiteWorks leverages a zero-trust framework for swift compliance and offers a secure platform for defense data protection needs, with advanced security features and ease of use. Its intuitive UI, mobile apps, and centralized policy management simplify administration. Accelerate your CMMC 2.0 compliance and address federal zero trust requirements with Kiteworks' universal secure file sharing platform made for defense contractors. Visit kiteworks.com to get started.
Today's guest is Ariel Ekblaw, CEO of the Aurelia Institute, and I had the distinct pleasure of visiting their new space habitat pavilion when it was here in the Boston area earlier this month. Well, I'm in Roslindale, Massachusetts, which is part of Boston, in a really cool, gorgeous co-working space. Can you tell me a bit about what we are standing in right now?
Yes, absolutely. So you are standing in a truncated icosahedron.
Icosahedron.
Also belovedly known as a buckyball. Mm-hmm. So a buckyball has 20 hexagon panels and 12 pentagon panels. So that's the geometry that you see that essentially makes the outline of this self-assembling dome.
Okay, self-assembling. How does that work?
So in space, we design a system that has magnets on the edges of these flat-packed tiles. And so you can imagine space Legos released to free float and essentially build themselves in orbit. In this case, we design the geometry of each panel so that the curvature all comes together into a glorified soccer ball or a buckyball. Now, the structure you're in right now is an Earth-based mock-up, so this one is not going to go to space, but we built it to be able to communicate to the public what our vision is for the tesserae habitat interior design while we work on that self-assembling space-grade version.
Would it be around this size? Is that sort of the vision? Wow.
Exactly. So we're aiming towards something that's around 10 meters for interior diameter, so just over 30 feet, and that is accurate, true to scale for what we're standing in here. The goal is a really open, large, expansive volume.
It is very big. And there's also really interesting features throughout. And the entire effect, just cumulatively, because I think I'd struggle to probably describe all the cool things that are in here. I mean, some of them almost look like a coral, and there's a really fascinating, like a science station over here, but it's beautiful. It's just the first thing that strikes you when you step in here. It's not a metal tube floating in space that's very clinical. This would be a delight to spend time in, I think, for anyone, but I can imagine maybe a crew doing hard work in space. The arduousness of that, being in here would be a source of joy.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what we're going for. This space is built on dozens of interviews that my co-founder, Sana Sharma, led as part of an astronaut ethnography project to learn from astronauts about comfort and care in orbit. And this module in particular is the communal module, exactly as you said, where people can gather after a long day working or commuting to and from space. And in particular, thinking about how do we grow food, cook that food together, and break bread together and eat together in space. So I'm so happy that feeling comes through for you, because we're very intentional about trying to push back on the sterile aesthetic, the silver, the chrome, the 1960s space modernist vibe.
Yeah.
And actually have a much more comfortable, inclusive, welcoming space that you can really live in, a space that you'd be thriving in, not just surviving in.
Yeah, I love that. And given that you said it's a module, could these sort of click together so you could sort of daisy chain a whole bunch of these together to make a really large...
Exactly, an expansive space station. That is indeed our goal. So this is module number 1, but the vision is that we would have some of these panels be an airlock so that you could have other functional tesserae ball modules. One of our kind of key capstone projects is this case study, orbital case study, where instead of focusing on communal eating, cooking, and growing, we focus on a biotech lab in orbit. So you can imagine pairing this communal space with a lab space or a functional space or even crew quarters.
Wow, okay. So are the different structures we've seen here sort of telling part of that story? So again, I'm not sure how to explain. Like, what is that? What is that? So a bunch of inflatable cylinders of different color. Okay, I'm not explaining this well, but what is this sort of organic form? What is that? Yeah.
So what we're looking at across the module here is a sea anemone-inspired space couch. So in space, you can't sit down, right? Yeah. You can't rest on a horizontal surface, but maybe like a sea creature, you can nestle in to a beautiful sea anemone. So it is a very intentionally whimsical space inflatable. The color palette that we're seeing is a mix of green and gold and olive green and white, and it's meant to harken back to these really important earth tones. Yeah. We know how important biophilia is for humans. So yeah, that's the vision behind this massive space.
So like a little clownfish astronaut nestling in the anemones.
Exactly.
Oh, I could totally see that. That's only possible in space, but that makes a lot of sense now that you've explained that. I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. And I would imagine, so this looks something like a porthole, but there's some interesting, is that just ornamentation? There's some sort of stones around the edges of it, or is that just for beauty?
So everything we do at Aurelia, we try to have this dual purpose for. So one of our goals, right, is to move beyond the model of the International Space Station, where it's pretty much just for functional use. That you're looking at is an algae stained glass window. So it is for beauty.
Wow.
It is for beauty. It's meant to be able to really inspire delight and awe, but it's also functional. So the idea is that the light from outside of that habitat comes in and feeds the algae. The algae is then able to produce supplemental oxygen for the crew. So it alone is not sufficient for an environmental control and life support system, but it's a really important supplement and one that we think is important to have some fun with and let it be beautiful, let it really captivate people. Yeah. And then behind it is that cupola window.
Oh, very, very important. And the green, it really looks like sea glass, sort of, is the color that it reminds me of, which is such a magical color. So to see that in something that, we don't usually think of in the space environment is that's really outstanding. And I see there's a number of sort of netting arrangements here. I would imagine this is maybe for wayfinding. That makes a lot of sense.
As a lot of your space listeners will know, if you have a big enough expansive volume, you can get stuck in it in the middle.
Skylab. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have this netting, which was actually hand knotted by our team members. Really? So in the long tradition of spacefarers who used to knit their own ropes and nets for sailing, we hand knotted this rope and now have installed it as part of that ergonomics and wayfinding aspect of the habitat.
Well, it looks beautiful. So kudos to everybody on that. That's some really good work. And so this, I don't even know how to describe this. So, okay.
You're looking at a big hexagon panel. One of the big open geometries of the tesserae shape. And we have segmented it into 6 different segments. So the capstone is this aeroponics green vault.
Oh, yep.
This is a fully functioning aeroponics green vault.
Really? Okay.
So we can put active live plants in there. We've tested the spray nozzle in 0G on some of our Aurelia Horizon program flights to make sure that this would actually be a functional way of getting the roots wet for plants in microgravity. Now, of course, there's kind of 2 purposes there. One is for the mental health of astronauts actually being able to care for plants. We know how important that is for emotional support for a deep space mission, but then also just pragmatically for food. So we also selected a selection of plants and herbs that have very strong flavors to help counteract that challenge of loss of taste and loss of smell in space due to the redistribution of the fluid in your body. Yeah. Below that green vault, which is really the capstone, on either side, we have fermentation orbs. Now, these are designed to be like planets, designed to be playful.
Kimchi?
That is kimchi. And above it is sourdough, and to the right is pickled seaweed.
I was going to say, it looks like seaweed. That's fantastic. Listen, I love pickles, so you can't go wrong.
Yes.
I mean, and they're great for your gut, so.
They are. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Shelf stable, but actually have good probiotics for gut microbiome.
That's fantastic.
Trying to move beyond that traditional freeze-dried food or just more traditionally packaged food.
This makes a lot of sense. Okay, I would, now that you've explained it, I'm going, I didn't know how to describe this, but yeah, it's you've got, almost like a terrarium, like, as you said, is a keystone at the top. And then these different orbs with food inside of them. Now that I look more closely, that is so beautiful. It's beautiful.
The center one, thank you. The center one has a very special story. It is a zero gravity and has been tested in zero-G flight a couple years ago. Zero gravity sous vide. A boiler.
I don't even have one of those at my house. That's really, but I've heard the steak is great. You can make a sous vide. So that
even for pasta, it's basically the only way we could boil in space. So sous vide might sound a little fancy, but it's really just pragmatically a boiler.
That makes sense.
How you boil food in space.
Well, that is really clever. I got to hand it to you. This is a really fantastic setup. And I was hearing a little bit anecdotally about the process of making this setup here in Substation. Can you tell me a bit about that? Because it sounds like it's a cool story.
Yeah, so it's a Amish-inspired barn raise, basically, that the whole team does all together. We do all of the engineering and the design in-house, and then we all get up on ladders and we build it in-house. So you're looking at an almost 30 feet high or wide structure. And we all did this all together last week. So we put it up in a week.
So that is your own sweat equity. So kudos to the whole team. That is not a small deal. That's wonderful. This is something you really built with your own hands. That's fantastic. What are the plans for this? How long is this going to be here? Is it going somewhere after this?
It is indeed. We actually just got the news of this, so I'm super excited to be able to share. Starting in late September, we've been invited to exhibit at the Seattle Museum of Flight.
Oh!
So we're going to build the whole dome, and it'll be open in the museum all the way until January for the public to come see.
We'll be right back.
Most of our listeners who deal with legacy privileged access management products know they tend to be expensive, difficult to deploy, and hard to use. Keeper Security is the answer. Keeper's Zero Trust solution delivers password, secrets, and connection management in one easy-to-use platform. It's fast to deploy, agentless, clientless, and has no implementation fees. Plus, Keeper is FedRAMP authorized. That's why we trust Keeper to prevent breaches and gain full control over privileged users. Visit keeper.io/cyberwire to schedule a quick demo. That's keeper.io/cyberwire. And thanks to Keeper Security for supporting our podcast.
Welcome back. Space missions in limbo may just find a second chance in the commercial space world. For example, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Viper moon rover may find its chance to roam Terra Luna if a private company like Intuitive Machines or, someone else, opts to take over the project from NASA. And another mission that's famously been in limbo for some time is NASA's Mars sample return. What if, instead of NASA trying to make it work, they hand over the keys to, SpaceX, and the mission uses a combination of both Starship and the Tesla Cybertruck to make Mars sample return a viable mission once again? It's understandable if you scoff at this idea, but you should know that there are rampant rumors right now that these are actually the core concepts to SpaceX's potential Mars sample return proposal to NASA. Just to refresh your memory, 7 companies in all responded to a NASA request for proposals back in April about their alternative ideas for the Mars sample return, as it's been pretty roundly confirmed that the current plans are both too wildly expensive and would take too long. So instead of NASA's CLPS, or Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, we might instead get a COMPS, or Commercial Martian Payload Services Program. Anyway, SpaceX is one of those 7 companies that indicated interest, and undoubtedly, Starship would factor into plans for a launch vehicle to get anything to Mars. The Cybertruck, though, that's a bit more far out. And the idea would be that it could, with some work, or a lot of work, serve as a Mars rover, like a Tesla version of the Perseverance rover. Cybertrucks on Mars might sound like a schlocky B-movie sci-fi, but it could also be a genuine proposal from Team Elon. Would be interesting if SpaceX sends another Tesla into space, but this time actually puts it on the ground somewhere. That's it for T-Minus for August 12th, 2024, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like the show, and we always hope you do, please share a rating and short review in your favorite podcast app. Also, you could please fill out the survey in the show notes or just send us an email to space@n2k.com. We are privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth. Our associate producer is Liz Stokes. We are mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president, Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm your host, Maria Varmazes. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.
T-minus.
This September 18th and 19th in Denver, a tight community of leading experts is gathering to tackle the toughest cybersecurity challenges we face. It's happening at MWise, the unique conference built by practitioners for practitioners. Brought to you by Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, MWise features one-to-one access with industry experts and fresh insights into the topics that matter most, right now, to frontline practitioners. Register early and save at mwise.io/cyberwire. That's mwise.io/cyberwire.